right, people, I'm calling this executive committee meeting to order. We're going to move along at a very concise clip today. You are forewarned. So, with that, would you please take roll?
Yes. Committee Vice Chair Meadows.
Here.
Director Scazola.
Here.
Klein.
Here.
Walia.
Here.
Tyson.
Here.
Thank you. I'll note Director Martinez-Beltran is absent, but we have a quorum.
All right, so do we have any public comment on items not on the agenda in the room? Okay, none in the room. And do we have any online?
Yes, we do. Bruce, whenever you're ready.
Like Bruce.
And do we usually time? If we're timing, I'm gonna give it, well, we usually do 3, I guess, but 2 is always good.
All right, well, I'll do my best to be concise. I asked Andrea to print out, and I believe she's distributed 2 pages. I want to talk first about the one called Modeled Emissions and Emissions Reductions. This was a document produced for the city of Mountain View by a consulting firm called Cascadia. And what we had asked them to do, or what the city had asked them to do, is to tell us if we could be carbon free by 2035 or 2040, as opposed to the city's existing goal of being carbon neutral by 2045. What this graph shows is that we don't know how to be carbon neutral by 2045 or 2050 or actually any year. So there may be some flaws in the modeling, but one of the things that it suggests to me is that cities and citizens are going to have to do a whole lot more than we've currently thought about in order to find our way to carbon neutrality. We're going to have to investigate serious investments in some sort of offsetting or climate restoration investments. So let's set that aside for a moment and look at the other graph. One of the things that Mountain View has a lot of is direct access energy customers. I asked the city finance department what companies were paying our user utility tax for direct access, and they came back with the names of about 8 companies, and they're listed on the top of the first slide, or the second slide rather, along with SVCE and PG&E. And you can see that each of those companies has a different profile for their carbon emissions. They've all been trending slightly down. They're all, as far as I can tell, compliant with the state's current RPS standards, but they're a whole lot dirtier than SVCE and PG&E, with the exception of a 100% renewable product from 3 Phases Energy. But even that product relies on some system power, so it has a carbon footprint. I've taken the average of all the ESPs on the lower graph on the second page, just so that we could sort of have a clearer picture of how much worse electricity from those providers is than electricity from SVCE and PG&E. And what I'm hoping that the city of Mountain View will do is actually impose a tax on dirty energy from direct access, which will either be passed along to the companies that buy that direct access power, or will cause the companies to jump to a different supplier of electricity, which could be SVCE, it could be PG&E, or it could be 3 Phases with their 100% renewable product. This is, not as big a contributor to greenhouse gas emissions as other things, but it's certainly worth paying attention to. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, as always, Mr. Carney. Any other public comments?
No additional comments.
No additional comments. Okay. So with that, we're going to move on to the consent calendar, which consists just of the minutes. Do we have any comments or discussion on the minutes, or can I have a motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
All right. Yes, and do we have any public comment on the minutes? No? All right. So we have a motion and a second. Since we can just do it in the room. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No abstentions. Okay, we're good. So we next move on to the CEO update.
Okay, I have 2 brief updates. One from me is just a reminder that we have scheduled a special board study session for next Friday. It starts at 10 a.m. at the Juniper Hotel in Cupertino, followed by lunch. And then also followed by an opportunity for you all to meet with staff, because all of staff will be there. since it's our quarterly in-person days, and so we're all 70-ish of us will be there. We're also inviting you.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Maybe like 65, so people can't make it. We're also inviting you to a kind of coffee chat with a professor from UC Berkeley, Severin Bornstein, at 8:30 a.m. That is not a board meeting, but we will, if we have to. I think we're noticing it just in case we end up with a quorum. And so if you can make it at 8:30, we'll have coffee, treats, food, and we'll learn about data centers, AI, and kind of the uncertainty about planning around that data center in California and nationwide. And then I wanted to give Zoe an opportunity to give you a real brief update on where we are with respect to the new building. And so, Zoe, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. Hi, good morning. So important development today. We had our site walk at the building. So there was actually 22 folks that came. That was contractors and their subconsultants. But just before Christmas, we released the request for bids to a group of 4 pre-qualified bidders. And so we expect to have 4 high quality bids that will come in. And this is for the office and workspaces and for the board chamber. We will be going next week to a public hearing with the city of Sunnyvale for the board chambers portion. I think I've mentioned before, these are on parallel tracks, but slightly different permits because the board is a public space. But we anticipate that the construction will happen at the same time. And we are currently on track. Every time I say we're on track timeline, I feel like we need to knock on lots of wood. We're currently on track to bring the contract to the board at the January meeting. This kind of assumes that everything goes smoothly with the bid process and there's not a strong protest that pulls things back or anything, but everything is on track for that January meeting. This is going to come up, I believe, later in Amrit's presentation. We have all along been being very cost conscious and also running estimates of what our construction would be. We are, the first estimates came in were above what we had budgeted. So as part of this update, you'll hear more from Amrit. Get into that. But that's the news on the building.
Can you remind me, when do we think construction, when do we think the move might be?
Currently, we're scheduled to begin construction in February and to move into the building in July.
And our lease here goes through?
June. So construction is scheduled to complete in June. We do have a couple of weeks of move-in period within that contract. We did, I heard our project manager asking some of the consultants there today, how does this timeline, it's about 17 weeks of construction look for y'all? And I mean, I don't think anybody's going to say no in that meeting, but yeah. So that's the timeline that we are working on, and all of the bids will need their price. Will need to, be on our schedule. So,
and if we have to, we can go fully remote. That's also an easy time for us because we break from work meetings and everything else. Yeah. And a lot of staff takes time off after our in-person days. We also have a satellite spot that we could use if we had to use it for whatever meeting. So we think we're going to be fine. So that's the plan.
And Director Wally, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for that question on the responses. That takes care of 80% of that. I believe we also had an extension if we really needed to. We could do a monthly extension for the lease here. Am I mistaken?
I'll have to, Mike, you negotiated the lease. We have an option to go month to month after June in this current space.
I believe they removed the option to go month to month, but we could connect with them if we needed to extend before the end of the lease to try to work out some additional time.
Okay, if we needed to. I am confident that all of you are working right. Do you need any of us? I'm happy to volunteer to come to Sunnyvale council meeting. Planning commission.
It's right before the board meeting. So it's at, what time is it on Wednesday?
It's Monday.
Oh, Monday. No.
Right? Yeah, can you send me the information? Especially if it's Monday, I can do it next week.
No, I think it's Wednesday.
Yeah, it's Wednesday.
Wednesday at 3 p.m.
And it is Zoom. It is a Zoom meeting.
Staff, it's administrator meeting.
Administrative hearing. We anticipate it being a smooth sailing.
I'm just volunteering in the interest of time. I'll just say I volunteer if you need. I'm happy to.
So you'll share the information
will share that.
and people
Exactly.
can
Thank
make
you.
their own
Got it.
decision.
Yep.
Great. Any other comments from the executive committee? Do we have any public comments on the CEO update, either the building or Monica's part? Nothing? Okay. Anything else? No. All right. So we've got a meeting item, meaty item number 2. Amrit has all sorts of things to tell us this morning, so take it away.
Okay, so this is our fiscal year 2025-26 budget update. This is a veteran group of members here, so you know our schedule. This is the time we do it in December, update. We'll go to the next slide. And that's because we get better information on PG&E's upcoming rates and PCA. So the plan today is to provide you with the update, compare it to the adopted budget that the board adopted in September, what has changed, go through the highlights, and then we'll make some staff recommendations for what we think the rates, our proposal for rates for 2026. Okay. So the highlights, some things have not changed. When we look at the 5-year outlook, very similar to what we discussed in September, it's still negative. And you'll see a new word there. I've added business as usual scenario. So what do I mean by that? You know, our practice has been to set rates because we have the advantage of doing so at a competitive advantage to PG&E. So that's what I'm referring to as business as usual. If we were to continue to set rates relative to PG&E's rate. So the 5-year outlook, as I'll show later, is very similar. As I mentioned, ending in the 5-year projection at 150 days of cash on hand. For this fiscal year 26, the draw on reserves increases to 60 million. In September, we said it was going to be 40 million. What has happened, I'll walk you through that. Main big item being the continued decline in the energy prices. For 2026 rates, what we're asking is we continue under the business as usual scenario, which is to give a 1% discount to PG&E rates. We continue to provide a bill credit for our low-income customers to, again, weigh our affordability objective. And the reason, and what I intend to show in the presentation is that even if we were to do this at the 1% and with this bill credit, the financial reserve target that we are recommending that we reach over 5-year, even if we were to go with this conservative business as usual, where we discount at let's say a 1% discount to PG&E, a delay in 1 year of doing so. In other words, in 26, giving a 1% discount in bill credit, but not charging a premium to hit the target, and the target is going to be 250. What's the impact, both in terms of our ability to reach that target and more so on customer rates? And what I intend to show is that impact is small, and therefore it affords us this time of 1 year, at least in 2026, when we could work with the board and the committees to basically form a much better strategy that we're calling financial levers. As Monica mentioned, we're going to go in depth discussion at the special session on the 12th. Okay, so that's now comes to supporting slides. So you can see the big change from the adopted budget that's contributing to the 60 million draw is the decline in energy revenues. And that's because the CPUC's prices, market price benchmarks, came in lower. The energy prices have continued to decline. That's the big reason, as you know, how the PCIA, the mechanism works. That's the big update. There's a corresponding reduction in power supply because when prices come down, our portfolio costs do come down. If you remember, with the updated energy risk management policy, we do allow for room. In other words, basically account for the PCIA impact so that when prices do come down, we leave some positions open from a physical standpoint so we can actually take in that lower prices as opposed to having locked in previously at higher prices. So that helps. And then the non-operating revenue, that's just a slight reduction. That's reflecting the updated interest rates. The other ask is what Joey actually already talked about, which is we need an additional 5.5 million for the build to complete the building, the office space and the board chamber. So all that basically is what's leading to an increase of 20 million additional draw than what we presented in September. Okay. Yeah. So very quickly walking through the rate impact. First column is what the rates are. These are weighted average rates for our portfolio in 2025. The second column is the adopted budget, and the last third column is basically what the rates are. You can see the blue box shrinking, which is basically the revenues that come into SVCE. And then again is due to those declines in market prices. But on the flip side, if you look at it from a customer perspective, you can see from a customer affordability perspective, their rates are coming down, our generation, our portion, 30%. And we also looked at on a total electricity bill basis, taking into account PG&E's T&D. T&D, we're seeing there's going to be a slight increase, maybe 5% or so, but overall, when you combine all these, we expect rates to still, on a total rate basis, to come down 8% on average for our portfolio.
May I interrupt?
Yes, please.
I was anticipating I was going to ask about T&D right then, so your timing was perfect for me at least. I expected it to go down because of, I guess I had the impression that there were moves to switch funding of T&D out of the PG&E rate. And so I expected that to actually decrease. Am I thinking of this right?
I think the only thing that was impacting that I remember on T&D was the wildfire fund, that there were some reductions to the
That's what I
wildfire.
was thinking of,
Yeah,
yes.
and that was about 2 cents, I think, is what we had, no?
Okay,
Yeah, it's minimal. We don't
so it's
have
minimal, all right.
good understanding of PG&E's T&D rates, but this is our best attempt.
Okay.
So we'll know more in January, and of course we'll update and provide another update for budget.
But it's twice this. So
Oh.
it's really important for us to see the context for the customer.
Yes, absolutely. And there is a slide in the appendix
Yeah.
that shows this impact as well. So this is the usual way we project our 5-year financial forecast in days cash on hand. You can see, as I mentioned, we're ending with 150 or so. Again, I'll remind you the difference between the two bars. The lighter blue is basically takes into account funds that we have set aside but not yet spent. And a big part of this is the program. It's about $100 million or so. And then the darker blue, we take that out. But of course, as long as the funds are in there, that's what we manage in terms of financial liquidity. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So under the business as usual scenario, what we're saying is, in the previous slide, that's the way we do the budget. But we know there's flexibility in that budget, right? We don't want to come to the board every time we need an increase to update the budget. So we put some contingencies for operating, other than power supply. There's an element of contingency for staffing, professional services, and so on. So when we look at it over a 5-year period, we think it's reasonable to assume we're not going to, we have that headroom. So we're assuming a reduction in operating expenses from the previous slide of about $6.5 million a year. Okay. Then, if you remember the previous slide, in the 5th year, you saw the 2 bars were at the same level. That means we were gonna hit the bullseye and not have any lag in funding what's been funded and what the spend is for that year. In other words, all program spends will be taken up by the customers, all program budget set aside, including the earmark funds. We think that's very unlikely. So we're saying, let's assume there's 25 million remaining. And remember the board, and we have had this discussion in the past when we were at good budget years, we were setting aside money program. Board always had this direction to redirect the funds. If we've got into financial difficulty, we will obviously come to the board and add those choices. Okay, so that's what I would say. This is sort of our modified base case that we're going to be basing our decision on. Next two slides. Okay. Yeah. So the target we're recommending in terms of managing our finances is let's target to stay above 250. Okay. We set target at 350. Remember the whole exercise, we go through the stress test. 250, we had discussions with some rating agencies. Moody's had actually at one point mentioned 250. And that's a reasonable cushion, we think, to be managing under this very uncertain outlook. Remember, there's a lot of uncertainty. And there's a slide in the appendix. I'm not going to discuss it, but you can see PG&E's, the error rate in PG&E forecasting 2026, not 2030. 2026 raised in May versus what the update is now. Our revenue impact would have been 120 million, it's not 40 million. So these are not easy numbers to forecast. There's a lot of uncertainty. Nevertheless, keep that in the background. What we're saying is, if we, instead of giving the customers the 1% discount and the bill credit, what if we set the rate starting 2026 to hit that 250? Previous slide, remember we were hitting at 200, get that additional 50 days at the end. It says we'll start charging a premium higher than PG&E of about 1.8% or 2%. Okay, if we were to reach that financial target. Let's go to the next slide. So we're saying, so remember what we're proposing. We're saying, well, next year, let's keep it business as usual until we come up with a better framework strategy. Giving the 1% and the $12 bill credit, right? If we were to do so, but still had to, let's say in the conservative case, obviously we're going to come up with a better operating model. But if we were to default to the business as usual of setting rates relative to PG&E, but we lost that opportunity to charge a premium in 26, but starting in 2027, what would that additional increase be? What would that increase look like still over to get to 250 by 2030? So if we were to start that premium in 2027, it'd be higher, 2.7% or 3%. Okay. Go to the next slide. So based on that, I guess I should go to the bottom part first. That additional premium of almost 1%, 1% discount or premium to our customers, residential customers, for example, is like 50 cents or 53 cents. We're saying that's not, I mean, obviously any increase, is not a good increase, but remember there are a huge rate drop from a customer bill perspective that customers are getting. And this year we provided additional credit, knowing that the rates were going to come down. And this is the year to actually provide the bill credit because the rates were high. So all that. So the 1% being only 50 cents, we think that's not a huge impact. Under this unlikely scenario, we were to continue with the business as usual. But remember, what we're saying is, let's not change the operating model right now. Let's have the time in 2026 so we can engage in that better discussion with the board, the community, and come up with a better strategy, what levers we want to have and what levers we want to pull as we learn more about how the market developments evolve over time. Okay, so that's the basis of our recommendation, and I think that's pretty much Andrea, that we just asked for your vote.
Before we go to just one thing to add, again, the 2026 timeframe is when we're really going to look at the strategy, and that's going to kick off next week in the study session. So the topic of the study session is the financial levers, and the team has a really nice kind of presentation and activity for you all to participate in. And then also that'll come along with the decarb roadmap because they kind of go hand in hand, programs and budget. And so for today, we're really focused on what we need to do for rates in 2026. That's it. Now you can ask all your questions.
All right. Actually, Director Welly, I think you thank me first. George will be next.
Thank you. And Monica, thank you so much for that background. And I'll
Yes.
keep it contained, and thank you for framing it that way because it's a long discussion. We don't have the time right now. I'll frame comments, questions kind of together, so that you hear where I'm coming from. Have you considered / I have concerns, not personally, but cities, residents, just giving the 1% number, there could be, I have residents like that. I have colleagues on the council like that who don't believe in clean energy. They could use the messaging. Have you considered that? And if you can elaborate on that, thank you for pointing out it's only 53 cents, and all of that. So just help me. I'm going to stop right there.
So I may not have fully understood, so please correct me if I'm not answering. Remember the customer impact, the bill impact, expected to be lower. Both our portion is coming down 30%, right? Our rate relative to what we're charging in 2025. And we think with PG&Es, the rates we've seen, they're projecting for T&D, even that portion, even if you combine it with that, Andrea, let's go to that. There's a slide in the appendix. It still comes down 8%. Yeah, keep going. Okay, this is, yeah. That's okay. This is all right. So this is with the T&D, the gray portion. That's PG&E's portion. You can see we expect our customers' bill. This is weighted average for our portfolio. Would still come down 8%. Customers' bill are still coming down. We're still at and we haven't changed our operating model, right? We're still giving them a discount, 1%. And remember, we gave a bigger discount this year when rates were high, effectively 10%. Now, would you have rather we had kept it at 4% in 25 and then given you more in 20? This year, no, because this year you're in fact what you're feeling in your wallet is much better than what you felt last year. So that's the basis from a customer perspective.
You helped. It's a longer conversation. I get it. All of the things, the affordability, the mission, and the long-term agencies, SVCE's operability, the impact on the budget, and all of that. And I'll add the word messaging, how that can be pulled out of context. And I'll stop right there. So I wrapped up the questions and comments.
I didn't clarify. We'll do questions and we'll take public comment and then we'll have more discussion around it. So.
Okay, I'm gonna get a little wonky for you.
Oh.
I noticed that your revenue, so what you're showing us is a pretty sharp decline in price and therefore the PCIA growing and a big hit to our reserves this year. In future years, I see the revenue going up somewhat. What visibility, I know the answer to this already, to PCIA do you have in those out years? Because that's so important in our finances.
So Andrea, let's go to that customer slide again in the appendix. Not that this one. So embedded in so the dark blue, that's SVC generate. So that's our revenue. You can see it's going down next year, then slightly going up. And you can see our projection of PCIA in there. And this is assuming 1% discount going forward. Okay.
All right.
So that's and what insight do we have? We don't have.
I already know the answer to that. But that's actually, I didn't see the slide. So I see it. There's your number. You're going with it. All right. Ready for the next one?
Yes.
Does this model assume no further prepays?
So we've assumed the prepays that we have executed are into the savings, but we have not. Scott can correct me if I'm lying. We have not anticipated additional, but we will be doing more prepays. Yes, so there will be some savings.
So that can help. I noticed the interest income is a big part of our income right now where we are. Strikes me that we're around 4%, but it looks like it goes down in future years. Can you give some visibility to your estimate there?
Yeah, so we don't know what the interest rate environment will be as the energy prices or any market trade prices. We basically look at the forward yield curve. As you know, interest rates have come down. The Fed has reduced rates. So we looked at the time we did the snapshot, we looked at the forward yield curve, and that's what we based it on.
All right. Okay. And my last question, because I know time is important today, especially for Sally. If we have load growth And
Never.
due to other reasons, doesn't that effectively, even though if our cash is the same, our days of supply then goes down? So it's actually worse than what you're showing?
If our load grows under this model,
Yes.
yes, it will be. Because there are years with it, like next year, the operating margin is negative. We're losing money for every kilowatt hour we're selling. So yes, but this is not the strategy we would pursue, right? Load growth, depending on what the customer is, like we have direct green prime where we have different arrangements with
So
customers.
it's pricing.
With index pricing that shields us from market price risk. There are a lot of things that's in the table and in the toolbox and in the discussions to come.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
So it looks like Scott may have something to add, though we seem to have answered, but yeah, we'd
Sure.
like to go ahead and hear what you have to add concisely.
Just very quickly to the question on prepays. So in the budget runs, we assumed the executed prepays definitely. We also assumed renewal of prepays that expire in the 5-year horizon. And we assumed a conservative estimate of additional prepays that would be beneficial to the portfolio to help offset some of the things we struggle with.
Darn.
Okay.
I know we had the discussion, I didn't know where we had left it.
Oh, that's the darn, that's the darn. Okay, thank you, helpful. Was that your only question?
No, I was going to, so thank you for the
yeah.
prepay, because I was wondering how that was
Yeah.
baked in, and, that conceivably saves us money in the long run. You mentioned the 250 days in Moody's was suggesting lowering that, or 350 to, or back to 250. Can you elaborate slightly?
So these rating agencies are not going to be a hard number, right? I'm going to judge you if you did hit this metric, that metric. We just had an extensive discussion with S&P. Well, in the Moody's, one of the reports, the last report, when they upgraded our rating, they did say it will be a concern if days cash on hand dipped below the 250. So.
And I also add on with that, from our understanding, what's also of interest to the rating agencies is the board's willingness and ability to adjust rates as necessary to accommodate increasing costs and to not operate us into a hole, right? That's really important too.
How is that reported to the agencies, from an evaluation standpoint? The fluctuation of the board and our resetting of that to meet long-term goals.
So we went through this discussion. We basically said that our board, we go through the extension planning process. In each fiscal year, our planning process is about 15 months for fiscal year. We start in February, remember, with the stress test, with the finance committee, all the way to the mid-year budget. That's a 15-year span. We meet monthly, provide information, and the board takes a very balanced approach. They look at financial objective 5 years, they look at customer affordability, decarbonization mission, and we don't have a formulaic approach. The board takes all these factors and comes up with a balanced approach. And that's how in the years when we needed to add reserves, even though we were making a lot of money, the board gave a very disciplined, but the board actually reduced it to 1% because we needed to add to reserves. Right. In years when still we could have given more, we were still adding to reserves. The board gave a very disciplined 4% discount. And last year when we said we were going to exceed our financial target and metrics, was a year we weighed more on the affordability side and gave them one-time bill credit.
Is that so? Just how is that reported to the agencies? Is it a message or is it a understand that we have a board that fluctuates. It's good to you're looking backward. You don't know, as we don't know right now, what the composition of the board is, in any given year.
How we provide it, we provide written reports, materials, and then we spend about two hours or so in discussion. So that's how we provide it to them. They always ask this.
Okay.
But we talk about the current board and the actions the board has taken, and we see a lot of continuity with the way the board has handled our finances. So remember this in the December discussion. Actually, we asked S&P what comments should we take to that meeting for our board members. And this was, they're concerned about finances, right? They want to make sure board is willing to raise rates when needed to save the company financially. And two, your customers will stay. So that discussion happened, and there's one other point that escapes me now, but I'm still.
I did want to bring up one thing. So, or a separate question. That 0.5% revenue, that 0.5% discount that we give our customers. What? Sorry, 1%. 1%. What does that mean for 2026?
Okay, let's go to that slide, the detailed rate slide. It's for res customers, it's 53 cents.
What does it mean to revenues to the organization? Not looking at our customers. What does it approximately mean?
Almost 4 million, slightly less than 4 million for next year.
1% of our.
Okay.
What, 350?
I'll have some comments later. Okay, that's all my questions.
I did have a quick follow-up question. That Moody's saying that they're looking appreciative of the board's willingness to adjust rates. Can I assume that pulling other levers, things we might not want to do, but may be necessary, such as, taking from the building fund or programs or something like that, would that please them in a similar way? The main point is that we have a nice balanced budget and look good with a big reserve, basically.
Okay, want a financial, you can survive.
Mm-hmm.
And they withstand. They are concerned about some discussions. Maybe it's too early to talk right now because it's ratings is now. But they're concerned about financial viability and customer stickiness.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple questions. So you're recommending 250 as our target versus 350 for days cash on hand. Is that viewed as a temporary thing during the next couple tight years, or is that a permanent change? Nothing's ever permanent, I understand. But what are you thinking?
Yeah, in terms of the reserve targets, we're gonna go through our regular exercise stress test and we'll revisit that. But I'm saying 250 under this scenario, because that's what we build reserves for, because we know commodity is a volatile. I cannot with any degree of certainty tell you it's gonna last 5 years, then it's gonna flip.
Right.
But we have seen in the past trends that we use to design that stress test, right? So we're saying under this business scenario that we see, business conditions that we're seeing, we don't want to dip below 250.
Okay, so it's for now, but not necessarily changing the policy.
No, that we will revisit again next year.
All right, and then regarding the building, it's not surprised that this kind of thing runs over and potentially runs late, knock on wood, we hope not. But was the building fund, did it have a contingency? We usually put in city level, maybe 15, sometimes 20%. And if so, have we gone into that contingency and then we're asking for this money on top of the contingency?
Yes, so in the fiscal year 23-24, we had transferred 20 million into building before we had even bought a building.
Right.
So looking at the purchase we made and looking at the expenditures to date and looking at what Zoe described earlier, with the bids coming in January, the contract Zoe and is going to bring to the board in January, the exact bid. And there's some contingency in the 5.5 that we're asking. But the 20 million is not sufficient to get us to completion, is what we're saying.
Not surprising, unfortunately. All right, so we'll check for public comments. Do we even have public in the room? I see some faces, I don't know, but I don't think they're public.
Well, Bruce was here a while ago.
Well, Bruce was in the room I was asking about, but online, yeah. No public comments online?
We do.
Oh, we do.
Yes, Bruce, Carney,
Okay.
Bruce,
All right.
when you're ready.
Thank you. In the early days of the agency, I went to a couple of CPUC meetings where PCIA was on the table. There were a lot of CCA advocates at that time who were very irate that the PCIA existed. and they wanted it to be either lowered or dropped. I haven't heard much activism about that lately, but one of the things that was talked about in those meetings was, well, what is the path that the PCA takes towards zero? Because, if this is a fee to pay for contracts that PG&E entered into when it had 100% market share, and now it has 50% or whatever it is, those contracts end. And I wonder how much either the Cal CCA or SVCE, how much time has been spent attempting to really understand in detail how the PCIA will decline over time. And when will it be gone? I would be surprised if PG&E entered into any contracts that exceeded 20 years, and we're now 10 years into the existence of SVCE. So I know that it's not appropriate to get answers to questions, but I hope that those questions will be on the mind of the staff and the members of the board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kearney. Yeah. Well, we won't open that can of worms.
Yeah,
I was gonna say.
That's a whole other discussion.
That's a whole other
Which we can
discussion.
bring to you in 2026. when we
That
have
would
more
be-
information.
Cool.
That would be good, yeah. All right, so we have a very directed ask in front of us today to, does the executive committee recommend to our colleagues on the board to approve the updated fiscal year 25-26 operating budget? And we have a number of things that, 4 items that it says are included, but one, actually, I'm not sure that you mentioned much. Number 3, approving the new green prime rate of 0.0074. You didn't really touch on that. Do you want to touch on that before, and then Director Tyson?
It was in the staff report. So in
Yes.
November 2024, the board adopted a methodology for setting the rate. So we have used that methodology. This rate is actually coming down quite a bit. I think it was 0.17 is the rate for this year. And the reason it's coming down is because the RPS prices and other prices are coming down. So we're following that formula that the board set. So we're reducing this rate, and we will be asking the board to give the CEO the authority to set 2026 rates, which will also include green prime. So green prime premium. Remember, this is the rate we add on top of the green star.
Yes, George, okay. I'll go to Director Wiley.
Just clarification,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry about that. Thank you for reminding me, because I was wondering, so why even suggesting dropping the green prime rate from what we approved of earlier, and what's the ultimate dollar amount impact to SVC? That's the only clarification.
I don't have the dollar amount is very small. We don't have that much load in green prime. I mean, overall green prime revenue is like 2-point-something million. But the rate is dropping because prices are dropping, so we can't charge customers premium for something that costs us less.
Fair enough.
And it's following the board-approved formula that was set. So we're just following that formula and setting the rate. And remember, this is a premium we charge on top of green stock rate.
Yes, I'm good, thank you.
100%, those who want 100% are plans.
My comment is that I thought this was very thoughtfully done. I looked at it closely, as you can tell, and I think it's a very respectable, reasonable approach. In effect, we're on guard and we're wary, and we're going to be ready to respond as we need to in the future. I'm actually thinking about 2 things. The last executive committee meeting, I had to leave early, so I went and I watched it later just to see, because there was a discussion there about our discount, and is that holy ground? Is that a key part of our mission? And I would say no. I would say Bruce Carney's slide is really our mission and the decarbonization. And so I'm just going to say, if it turns out that we do have to get rid of our discount, or even have a surplus, if that's worth it to us, I'm receptive to that as we focus on the 2 things: our real goal and our Moody's.
Moody's.
Our rating.
Moody's is a whole
Which
different
is
thing.
key to our other things, such as our future prepay and all of that. So I would just say I go on and say that's the direction I'm okay with. That's not a bright line to me, that discount.
So you support all
I
the
do.
recommendations, okay.
I definitely feel it is holy ground. I won't talk too long on this since we're having the major discussion coming up soon, but I just fear also, PG&E's wrath, their major, huge budget for, essentially propaganda, and I could see delivery of, well, it would be accurate information. Hey, guess what? We're cheaper now, And I could see a mass exodus of customers, which would really affect the bottom line. That's another reason why, to me, I know it's not legally, ingrained, but it was a promise. I remember when I first heard about SVCE, and I remember hearing cheaper and cleaner. Well, why wouldn't you switch? And I would stay loyal to that because I think most people do, they want, their pocketbook to be affected as little as possible. And if they hear cleaner, most people do think that's a greater society for us. So I do think it's holy ground. So I'll leave it for the discussion, but I really fear that mass.
Discussion.
Well, I mean, the larger, I don't want
You mean the
to.
next discussion?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
This is not agendized to talk
Right,
about.
yeah.
discounts.
And that's not what we're being
Yeah, I'll
asked
wait
today.
till the lever pulling.
Right, so
discussion.
we're being asked to support that we have a 1% discount.
Yes, that I
for-
do support.
Okay, that you support, all right, thank you,
Absolutely.
all right, and Larry, yes.
So in general, I support what's here. I would actually be willing, and that's why the 0.5%, because I would say misread what it, like reducing that in the short term. Just from, I understand it doesn't dramatically affect things, but from a rating standpoint as well as just, okay, we need additional 5 million for this and all that. It's an additional $2 million that we're saving away before we have to make a harder decision. And I know we're not making those hard decisions now, but where we might be a year from now, it's like, okay, I do think whether or not we pay above the PG&E rate, whether or not it's a mass exodus, I don't think it would be a mass exodus. That being said, whether or not you charge more or create, and so I'll throw out a whole bunch of things since we're just blue sky here. A higher rate for people who want to decarbonize the community. I can't remember what movie it was, but basically charging more for those people that want to really, I'm happy to pay more to make a difference in my community. And there are lots of us that are, yes, we want to make a difference. But there are people that don't qualify for CareFair that will say, I just look at my monthly bill and a PG&E message of, we're cheaper than SVCE will basically cause some residents to leave. And so the longer we can forestall that, or whether or not we can say, is there a rate for and this would be polling, this would be, before we'd make those decisions, it'd be a much bigger thing. Yeah. I'm fine with what we have here, but I do think that there are things that we can do in the short term to allay that we're continuing to maintain under PG&E is fine. Or there are other things we can do for next year to look at other rate levels for other things. I do think that has value from an organizational standpoint. But I'm fine with the budget as it's laid out here. I do think that going to 0.5% would conceive, and I don't think that, it's a messaging and it would have to be, the problem is it creates a lot of work. If there was a 0.5-cent discount as opposed to a 1% discount, or 0.5% discount as opposed to a 1% discount. That being said, money's money at the end of the day, and it does make a difference to our final numbers. But I'm fine with what's here. The $12 credit, how was that achieved? How was that number achieved?
So this goes back to earlier board discussion when we were setting discount. So what we had talked about was, instead of giving 1% discount to every customer, In other words, instead of 4%, having no discount at 5%, what if we took that 1% in dollar equivalent terms and gave it to our care fare and low income customers? That's how we, this year, that number, because the rates being high, $17.50. So for next year, we're saying, using the same methodology, it's $12.
That's why I missed that in the document. Okay, I appreciate that. But I'm in general support of the budget as it stands.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you, George, about the mission. At the same time, I think I indicated early on, wrapped up with my questions, that we have to keep in mind the long-term impact of all the 13 communities, not just one city. And that's why I said, not my personal opinion, but when we have council members who don't believe in this, messaging is the key. I agree with what Elliot said, and I especially agree with the way we put it together, that we have to decide messaging, what price messaging, how much of a distraction for staff to just focus on where are the dollar impacts. So it's not a straightforward solution. I support what is recommended today by staff, but we have to keep in mind going above PG&E is going to be quite troublesome. Creative ideas, I love Larry's, I had not thought about that. Maybe people are willing to pay more. I personally know people who can afford it and have questioned me, not my residents only, in SVCE territory, to tech salaries, they have said, how come SVCE? And they believe in claim. So at the end of the day, we could lose customers. I'll stop right there. This is a longer discussion. Messaging will be key, how we present everything. And as you reminded me, hey, overall, PCI, all of this, the complexity, as I always say. And I especially like days cash on hand. I could see that in the staff report. I understand that where we are headed, what the target is, 250 bare minimum increase based on Moody's to 350. But at the same time, thinking about how we move forward, keeping 2026. Sorry, I had something else wrapped up. It's slipped out of my mind right now. But 2026 is the time we work through all of this and move forward. And I'm happy to have an offline discussion, maybe after the 12th. Oh yeah, what I was coming to is, you said the board, the continuity on the board, and somehow the messaging on the board, even with changes happening on the board, somehow we have managed, knock on wood, to move forward with what is in the greater interest of SVCE. We have also, I have just wrapping up 5 years, George has been here longer. I have seen, we have all seen, actually all of us have seen your board members who don't quite understand this complexity. So we can all, whether we are on the board or not, we have relationships with folks across the 13 communities here. And I would say, even if there are changes on the board, the CEO can reach out to us if we need to convince whoever is from, for example, my city on the board, to help them understand, because it's a long learning, right? I just wanted to add that here. We all believe in this, we all support it, and there will be our work cut out for next year. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so I think also a lot of what we're discussing actually is what we're going to really be discussing in the future. But I do want to say that, we're going to have to look at in the future trade-offs between rates and days cash on hand versus even programs. We've kind of ring-fenced that off, and yet that's actually, so, but I won't get into that, and it is going to be a complex discussion, and it will be a good discussion, I'm sure. So I want to point out that I appreciate that really what you're giving us is a year of holding a steady course and buying the time to make a more robust decision a year from now, or less than a year, probably the next time we see the budget. And you'll have done much more modeling. We'll have looked at all these variables that we're discussing. But right now we're going to have back to the 1% discount from the floor. no, I will hold my editorial comment about, well, no, I'll make it since I.
Just kidding.
Which is, each 1% is actually more meaningful to SVCE than it is to the customers. I agree that that being less than PG&E is very meaningful perceptually. So that, but to me, that 4%, getting the rebate is much more impactful than 4% or 2%. And I know, I'm sure I voted for it because that was probably unanimous. But anyway, so I made my editorial comment, and it sounds like we are reaching consensus that we support the recommendation to bring forward to the board to consider next week, right? Is it next week already? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's Wednesday. All right.
But Wednesday, you'll get a board presentation from Justin to give you a bunch of fundamental foundational information. And then Friday, you will be able to talk as much as you want in an open setting in the session about programs, our clean targets, differentiating product, our story, everything.
Unfortunately, I'll miss that, except I might be drinking a Mai Tai, so it's not so unfortunate. Not so unfortunate after all. Yes,
I'm ready to make a motion.
please do.
I move that we recommend the board of directors as per the.
As part of the staff.
Staff
recommendation. Do we have
as
a
per staff
second?
recommendation.
Yeah, okay, and second. All right, she beat you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No abstentions. So good. All right, thank you. That was a lot of work for a relatively concise discussion and very concise presentation. So thank you for that. All right, so next we have information on the community grants program development.
Yeah, fantastic. Jessica Cornejo, who is online, is actually going to give the majority of the presentation. So this is meant as an informational item. We've talked about, I know you all know a lot about our member agency grants, but as part of that same process, when we approve member agency grants, there's also a set of community grants. We are developing that program now. So we wanted to share an update on where we are in the development, answer any additional questions you have. Also want to take the opportunity to introduce again Allison Mass, who is here as our Climate Corps Fellow and is working with Jessica on the grant development program. So I'll hand it over to Jessica.
Morning, board. Happy to be in front of you today. As Zoe mentioned, I am the Decarb and Community Strategies lead, and I'll be leading this presentation. Next slide. So I have an exciting presentation for you all today, which is just an informational update on our developing competitive community grants program. I'll start with background and then go more into details. Next slide. Okay, so many of you have seen this slide in previous grant presentations, but again, just wanted to give a brief overview of our grant history. So to date, SVC has held 3 grant cycles. Our first grant cycle started in 2020 with the Community Resiliency Grant, which offered non-competitive funds for the agencies for resiliency measures. The second cycle was the 2022 Decarb Grant, which provided competitive funding to support the development of capital projects and engagement projects, showcasing the feasibility of all-electric technology. And then lastly, we have our latest round, which is the 2024 round, which was divided into 3 areas. The non-competitive and competitive member agency grants, which launched last October. Now for the competitive grants, we have already selected those projects. And today is also the deadline for the non-competitive grant form, which most agencies have submitted applications so far. And then lastly, within the cycle, we have our dedicated funding for community organizations such as schools, faith-based institutions, and nonprofits. Next slide. So again, a little bit of table setting. We've used the term community orgs as an umbrella term for the 3 groups that I've just mentioned. Now, in the past, we've encouraged partnerships with these groups in previous cycles. So in the 2020 cycle, we allowed agencies to partner with community orgs for their resiliency projects. I do want to note, no agency took us up on that. For the 2022 cycle, oh,
No, sorry, we're just laughing, not at you.
Oh.
At you.
Go ahead.
okay, good, just making sure.
Yeah.
For the 2022 cycle, we did allow schools and affordable housing complexes to apply, although we only received one application from a school who was ultimately awarded. Majority of those awarded projects from the cycle did go to the member agencies. And earlier this year, we conducted a brief survey to community organizations to gauge their interest as well as their knowledge on electrification. So the results from that survey showed that schools that had facility managers had way more capacity to do these kinds of projects, and they were quite familiar with building upgrades. On the other hand, nonprofits and faith-based institutions had little knowledge of electrification, but they were still interested in potential projects, although they did state that they would need significant assistance if they were to do any of these projects. And I do want to mention that much of the staff from nonprofits as well as faith-based institutions, they are volunteer-based. So from a capacity standpoint, it's quite challenging for them. So the developing community grants take the learnings from the previous cycle and the learnings from the survey to create a dedicated funding source with technical assistance provided for these groups. Next slide. And again, these grants have many benefits to our community. For one, they expand and strengthen relationships with key groups. They reduce emissions while engaging and educating the community. We also are continuously learning new things from these projects with each year, and we're getting a better sense of their positive impacts. And all of our grants are community investments and also align with our mission. And last but not least, our last grant cycle was awarded a Cal CCA award in 2023. So we have been recognized on a larger scale for these grant programs. Next slide. Okay. So to show the breakdown of the total 10.5 million in the cycle, about 3.5 million will be dedicated to the community grants. We are bringing on a technical assistance provider that will be offered to all grantees. And then in later slides, I'll be going more into detail about the timeline as well as eligible projects. I do want to note for eligible projects, it's not much deviation from our member agency grants. Projects such as building and transportation electrification and energy resilience are all on the table. Next slide. Okay, so diving further, the 3.5 million will be divided into 3 different streams. So 2.2 million will be dedicated to schools in the range of 500,000 to $1 million, and we anticipate to fund about 2 to 4 projects. For other community groups like the religious institutions and nonprofits, we'll offer a range between 300,000 and 1 million with an aim to fund about 1 to 3 projects. And then lastly, we do have about 300,000 dedicated to technical assistance. Now, if you're wondering why we split this even further, as I've mentioned in the survey, schools noted that if they had facility managers, they had much more capacity. And so we wanted to divvy this out so that it created a more even playing field when it came to applying for grants. Next slide. All right, next slide. All right, eligible projects. So as I mentioned, not much deviation from our previous grants. For electrification transportation, funds will be eligible to purchase EVs for community use, like for school buses and shuttles, as well as to purchase associated charging needs. For building electrification, we'll fund the removal of gas infrastructure and for replacement of appliances such as heat pump water heaters and heat pump HVAC units, as well as induction cooktops. For energy resilience, we'll fund solar and battery storage and off-grid EV chargers. And also, we are open to other electrification projects as well, as long as they align with our mission and reduced emissions. Next slide. All All right, keeping in the same vein as our existing grants, we will require an education component to this grant. So the community organizations will need to engage their constituents so that they too can learn about the benefits of electrification or energy resilience. So activities such as ribbon cuttings and community events and maybe flyer information as well would be all on the table. And I do want to note, we do have dedicated SVCE staff, and the future TA provider can also assist with the educational component again. So once again, just really providing that hand holding that is needed. Next slide. So we have planned a variety of activities to engage community organizations. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. We're open to other ideas as well. But our goal is really to, really show up as well as strengthen our relationships with these groups and ensure that the grants are well communicated. So for example, providing public comment at either city council meetings or school board meetings, hosting informational sessions and workshops with community leaders to further gain feedback, tapping into our existing relationships we have with schools through our existing student scholarship program as well. And then promoting on social media and developing template materials so that the grantees could ensure that they fill out a really thorough and complete application. And lastly, also tapping into our member agency staff as well, who is part of our member agency working group. Next slide. Okay, so here is where we are at. We currently just released the request for proposals for the TA provider, and we anticipate bringing the contract to the board for approval in March before we launch the grants. From now until then, we'll continue to design the program with an anticipated launch in spring 2026, along with the associated outreach. We'll have the grant open for a few months and anticipate selecting grantees in the summer. And so I believe this is my last slide, but do you want to give a quick shout out? As Zoe mentioned, we do have Allison on board. This whole project is her service year project. So did want to give a huge shout out that much of this work to date has been because of her. So with that, we could take questions.
All right, thank you very much. Any board member questions? We can do questions and comments at the same time, and then we'll pick up public comment at the end. I'm not sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Quick question, of the member agencies, today's the deadline. How many agencies didn't, I know it's not specific to the community grants, but for the non-competitive grants, how many agencies didn't apply? And is this an ongoing, let's say, history from the same organization? Do we need to try to decarbonize certain communities more?
Yeah, and we can't probably tell you exactly which ones didn't apply.
I was gonna say, who are you trying to shame?
We can follow up.
Yeah, it would be useful because it's that sort of thing, trying to make sure that we're trying to be as equitable across the entire region as possible, and looking at, new ways to continue to do that. So just wondering, but in general, thank you for what you're doing in the community. And I do think that, adding the technical assistance really does make a lot of sense, and trying to get through some of the barriers to decarbonize. So great.
Jess, can you tell us of the 13, how many have not applied?
There you go.
Have not applied. So actually for this round, we're doing great, guys. Mostly all the member agencies have submitted their grant application. I will note only one agency did request an extension, which we did allow for them to select a project and submit the grant application in February. But other than that, most of the agencies, I still have a few in my email, but most of them have submitted.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay. Did you have something? You didn't have anything to say?
I know it's
Director Valley?
unusual, but-
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you. And once again, you'll hear me focus a lot on the policy angle. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Larry. Reminders to the board, exec committee board members, whoever, please reach out, because staff gets busy with other stuff, too much happening. use us as your ambassadors or reminders or secretaries or whatever word you want to use. I will be more than happy. Just remind us, we are all here, I know, committed to this organization and the mission. Just use us, don't hesitate. That's my only request. Again, like the deadline, I had forgotten with other things happening, so thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
If there's one who hasn't applied, staff will reach out to the board, the respective board members.
The deadline is 5 p.m. today, right? I say this, please ping that one city as soon as we are done with this meeting. Pick up the phone.
Some organizations have transition issues.
Yeah.
Do you have
Oh,
any
no, I'm
comments? You're good? Okay. I think that was a really excellent presentation and appreciate the work. And also in terms of, just like Director Walia just said, if you need our help with outreach and engagement, to get it in our city newsletters, I've forwarded some of the information sometimes and say, please include it, because that gets in front of our residents every other week. So if you don't provide it directly, maybe, the directors also can try to get that in the newsletter. So that's good. Is there any public comment on this item?
No hands raised, concern.
All right, great. So do we have any remarks from the committee or from staff? All right, with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
You have 15
that's
extra